The Middle East has never been calm, but there are routes that never sleep, even when politics dozes off. Routes along which ships sail, planes fly, and millions of containers move, quietly, without fanfare or speeches, but with a force that shapes the world. For China, these routes have become something more than trade corridors. They've become arteries of a new order. When Beijing announced the Belt and Road Initiative, many saw it as an economic project. In reality, it is a civilizational project, a map of influence stretching from Shanghai to the Mediterranean Sea. And it is on the Arabian Peninsula, in Egypt and in Israel, that these threads intertwine most tightly. Here, where for thousands of years people traded gold, frankincense, and silk, today they trade oil, electronics, and data. This is where the modern caravans of the world pass, no longer made of camels, but of container ships and cargo planes. Ports that once belonged to the British or the French are now filled with Chinese cranes and Costco logos. The Suez Canal is once again becoming the heart of global trade, while terminals in Haifa, Ashdod, and Sokhna turn into nodes of Chinese expansion. In Dubai and Dammam, planes full of goods from Guangzhou and Shenzhen land every day, and out in the Egyptian desert factories and railways are being built to cut delivery times to Europe in half. For Beijing, this is a strategic symphony. Every port, every terminal, every runway is a note in a single global piece, a melody of power that can be heard more and more clearly in every corner of the world. But this melody sounds different in the Middle East. Here it mixes with sand, with the smell of oil, and with the history of empires that tried to rule this region. In the 21st century, empires no longer send armies, they send containers. And the Arabian Peninsula, Egypt, and Israel are no longer battlefields, but nodes of global logistics. Chinese ships, Arab ports, Egyptian canals, and Israeli terminals together create a new Silk Road that doesn't need borders, only capacity. These are routes that do not sleep. Because even when politicians fight over borders, the flow of goods continues. And in their shadow, the world changes. Today, China has an entire chain of modern terminals stretching from the South China Sea to the Mediterranean. And it is precisely in the Middle East that this chain shines the brightest. It starts in the Persian Gulf, in Jebel Ali, Dubai's giant port, the heart of global logistics. Chinese container ships arrive here every day, and terminals operated by Costco and DP World work to a rhythm increasingly set by Beijing. For China, it's a non-negotiable point, the biggest port in the Middle East, from which goods move on to Africa, Europe, and South Asia. A bit further south, Oman is building its Duqm port, an investment that may become an alternative to Dubai. Supported by Chinese capital, Duqm has one key advantage. It lies outside the Strait of Hormuz, in a place that is politically and militarily safer. Beijing sees it as a quiet backup port, ideal if things get too hot in the Gulf. In Qatar, Hamad Port has risen, modern, sprawling, built with the kind of ambition meant to free the country from dependence on its neighbors after the 2017 blockade. China joined its expansion almost immediately. Today, Hamad Port handles not only Chinese goods, it also serves as a transshipment point for the whole of East Africa. In Saudi Arabia, Chinese firms have appeared in the ports of Jeddah and Yanbu, as well as in the area of the future NEOM megaproject. There, a modern terminal on the Red Sea is to be built, a gateway to Egypt, and from there to Europe. Beijing understands perfectly that if it controls both shores of the Red Sea, it controls half of the world's trade. And on the other side, in Egypt, Chinese companies are investing in Sokhna Port at the entrance to the Suez Canal. This is a key piece of the puzzle. On one side, ideal links to Asia and the Gulf. On the other, fast access to Africa and the Mediterranean. The Chinese are expanding an industrial zone there, building factories and logistics terminals. For Beijing, Sokhna is a gateway to Europe via Egypt. Further north, in Israel, There are two ports that have changed the balance of power in the entire region: Haifa and Ashdod, both modernized with the help of Chinese consortia. In Haifa, a new terminal operated by Shanghai International Port Group has been built, capable of handling the world's largest container ships. Despite U.S. pressure, Israel did not pull out of this cooperation, knowing that Chinese investments guarantee it new clout and access to the vast Asian market. Looking at the map, you can spot something disturbingly logical. From Jebel Ali to Haifa stretches a chain of ports, terminals, and trade zones that form a new maritime route, a modern counterpart to the ancient caravans of the Silk Road. Each of these ports has a different owner, different partner, different language and flag. But they share one thing: all of them have Chinese money, technology, or containers in the background. For China, this is not colonialism, it's mathematics. Beijing doesn't need military bases. It only needs port cranes, warehouses, and long-term contracts. Through them, it controls the flow of goods. And in the 21st century, control over logistics is control over the world. Each of these ports is like a pearl, and together, they form a necklace stretching from the Indian Ocean to the Mediterranean. It is this necklace, braided from concrete, steel, and loans, that today is changing the map of the Middle East. On the world map, Chinese ports look like points of light: Shanghai, Ningbo, Shenzhen, Guangzhou, Qingdao. Each of them pulses with life 24 hours a day. From each, hundreds of ships leave daily. Huge steel colossi that are the modern caravans of the world. Their destination is no longer just Europe or America. More and more often, their course leads through the Middle East, because this is where all the sea routes of the 21st century intersect. First stop, the Indian Ocean. From Chinese ports, container ships head through the South China Sea, around Singapore, and into the Strait of Malacca, one of the busiest points on Earth. From there, they sail to ports in India, Sri Lanka, and Pakistan. It is there, in Gwadar, that the Chinese have built a port that is part of their strategic, economic, and energy corridor. From Gwadar, ships move on, across the Arabian Sea, to Oman and the United Arab Emirates. Jebel Ali, Duqm, Hamad Port. These are their next stops. Here, goods are sorted, repacked, and sent onwards, some to the north, to Saudi Arabia and Iraq, and some to the west, toward the Red Sea. There begins the most important stage of the journey: the Suez Canal. This 160-kilometer passage through Egypt is today the artery of Chinese trade with Europe. Around 60% of all Chinese goods bound for Europe pass through it. Every day the canal is blocked costs the world billions. The Chinese know this perfectly, which is why they invest not only in Sokhna port, but also in industrial zones around the canal. Thanks to this, goods from China travel in one continuous chain: Shanghai, Gwadar, Jebel Ali, Sokhna, Suez Canal, Piraeus. Just a handful of ports, and between them the entire global economy. This is where the genius of China's strategy lies. Beijing doesn't need military bases to control the ocean. It only needs control over a chain of ports and terminals. A few signed agreements and loans are enough to secure leverage over key trade points from Asia to the Mediterranean. Meanwhile, Europe and the US still look at the map the old way. They see borders, states, conflicts. China sees routes. It sees seas as corridors and ports as nodes for data, energy, and goods. That's why every new terminal in Dubai, Egypt, or Israel is not just an investment. It is an element of the infrastructure of an empire that doesn't need soldiers, because it operates according to the logic of trade and delivery times. The Suez Canal, Jebel Ali, and Sokhna, the terminals in Haifa and Ashdod, these are not random dots. They form the backbone of the maritime Silk Road that connects the Middle Kingdom with the heart of the world. Chinese ships don't fly war flags, but they possess another kind of power: time, logistics, and consistency. And in the 21st century, that is enough to redraw maps faster than ever before. In today's world, goods don't just move by sea, they fly. In containers, in holds, in the steel bellies of cargo planes that cross the sky every day between Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. It is here, above the deserts of Arabia and above the Nile, that the air corridors of the new Silk Road run. From China, giants take off. China Southern Airlines Cargo, Air China Cargo, SF Airlines, Hainan Cargo. Their routes lead via Hong Kong, Shenzhen, and Guangzhou, then across South Asia and on over the Arabian Sea. And almost all of them share one common stop: the United Arab Emirates. Dubai and Abu Dhabi have become for Beijing what Singapore once was for the British, the aviation hub of the world. Al Maktoum International Airport, DWC, in Dubai, is now one of the largest cargo airports on the planet. It partners with Chinese airlines via agreements with Emirates Sky Cargo and DP World Logistics. Every day, planes leave Dubai loaded with electronics, clothing, and components from China, bound for Cairo, Tel Aviv, Riyadh, and further on, to Europe and the Americas. But it isn't just Dubai. Doha, Riyadh, Jeddah, Cairo, and increasingly Tel Aviv are part of the game as well. Beijing understood that if it wants to control the flow of goods on a global scale, it must build a parallel air infrastructure. And it does this with surgical precision. Connecting east and west through Arab airspace, Chinese cargo cooperates with Arab carriers, Emirates, Etihad, Qatar Airways Cargo. Joint transshipment centers, warehouses, and logistics terminals are being built. In Dubai, goods from China are redistributed in real time. Some fly to Africa, some to Europe, some to the United States. For Beijing, this is the airborne version of the Suez Canal, only faster, more flexible, and more resilient to geopolitical storms. At the same time, Israel and Egypt are becoming important pieces of this puzzle. In Tel Aviv, Chinese cargo uses the modern Ben Gurion Airport, especially in the high-tech and medical sectors. In Cairo, Chinese firms have built warehousing hubs serving deliveries into Africa. The new administrative capital of Egypt is planned to have its own cargo airport, a project co-financed with Chinese funds under cooperation with CSCEC. As a result, something has emerged that the West failed to foresee: an airborne trade network in which the Middle East is the world's transfer point. A plane from Guangzhou lands in Dubai, its cargo is transferred, and within hours it is flying to Berlin, London, Lagos, or Nairobi. All within a single chain, with Chinese logistics and Arab management. These are the air caravans of today: quiet, fast, precise. There is no romance of old caravans carrying frankincense and gold. But there is something else: the accuracy of algorithms, GPS points, and billions of dollars changing hands every day somewhere between Dubai, Cairo, and Shanghai. And that is precisely why Chinese cargo airlines are now as strategic as tankers and ports. In a world where time is currency, whoever controls the sky controls trade. Israel is a small country, but it sits on the map as if it had drawn itself there for Beijing's benefit. Between Asia, Africa, and Europe, exactly where the Suez Canal ends and the Mediterranean highway of maritime trade begins. For China, an ideal spot. For the U.S., a red line. In 2015, Israel did something that, in Washington, sounded like an alarm siren. It agreed that the Chinese consortium Shanghai International Port Group, SIPG, would take over operations at the new terminal in Haifa, one of the key ports on the eastern Mediterranean. The deal covers not just handling operations, but also modernization and infrastructure management for 25 years. That means that for a quarter of a century, a Chinese company will manage one of Israel's main trade gateways, in a country that is America's closest ally in the Middle East. Why did Israel agree? Because it simply made economic sense. Chinese infrastructure investments were faster, cheaper, and more effective than Western ones. Thanks to Beijing, Haifa gained a terminal capable of serving the largest container ships in the world, and a port once associated mainly with the Navy became one of the most efficient in the region. But Haifa isn't the whole story. The Chinese also took part in upgrading Ashdod port and had earlier shown interest in modernizing the rail link to Eilat, the Red Sea port. There was even a Red Med railway concept, a line connecting Eilat with the Mediterranean, an alternative to the Suez Canal. If it were ever built, China would gain a land corridor through Israel, shortening transit from Asia to Europe by several days. No wonder the United States responded with warnings. American analysts began publicly asking whether Haifa, previously hosting U.S. naval visits, would remain a safe port if its systems were controlled by Chinese firms. But Israel did not back out of the contract. In Tel Aviv, the prevailing view was that you cannot shut the door on the world's biggest investor, even if that investor is Beijing. Over time, Chinese presence has become visible not only in ports, but also in industry, energy, and technology. Chinese companies have built highways, tunnels, and even energy systems. For Israel, that means real gains, modernized infrastructure. For China, a priceless foothold in a country that connects sea, desert, and Western markets. Today, Haifa is not just an Israeli port. It is a junction where three powers meet: the US, Israel, and China. Every container entering the SIPG terminal is a small gesture of Israeli independence from America. And at the same time, another move by China in its global game. Small country, big node. Israel has neither huge resources nor giant ports or vast markets, but it has a location that can't be replicated. And in logistics, that counts for more than thousands of kilometers of highways. For China, Israel is like a narrow neck in the global system. Controlling a few terminals is enough to gain leverage over the entire region. For Israel, it is both an opportunity and a risk. You can earn on Chinese contracts, but you can also easily be caught between two empires that are less and less willing to share influence. In the 21st century, Israel has become not only a startup nation, it has also become a port nation, a state that controls one of the key stops on the modern world caravan. And like every node in that caravan, it knows that whoever controls the port controls the future, at least for a moment. On the world map, the Suez Canal looks like a thin blue line, unimpressive, almost invisible, yet it is this line that determines the pace of the global economy. More than 12% of world trade passes through it, including most of the oil and goods from Asia to Europe. Each day of blockage costs the world billions. That's why China looks at Egypt not as a country, but as an artery of the planet. In 2014, President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi announced the new Suez Canal, an expansion and modernization of the route. But the real transformation began only when Chinese companies and banks entered the project. Under the Belt and Road Initiative, Egypt became a strategic partner for Beijing. Chinese consortia, led by China Harbor Engineering Company, CHEC, and China State Construction Engineering Corporation, CSCSE, began pouring billions of dollars into ports, roads, rail, and industry around the canal. The most important point in this configuration is Sokhna Port, located at the southern entrance to the Suez Canal. This is where the Chinese-Egyptian Tedda Suez Industrial Zone was built, home to hundreds of companies producing electronics, construction materials, and household appliances for export to Europe and Africa. It's a factory of the future, a place where goods designed in Shanghai gain a Made in Egypt label and thus bypass some European trade barriers. Further north, in Al Adabiya and Port Said, Chinese companies are investing in container terminals and port infrastructure. The goal is to turn Egypt into a logistics hub between Asia and Europe, something like a Switzerland of trade, where goods can be transshipped, processed, and sent in any direction. But the Chinese didn't stop at the coast. In the desert, a few dozen kilometers from Cairo, they are co-building with the Egyptian government the new administrative capital, NAC, a futuristic city meant to symbolize the new Egypt. Skyscrapers, ministries, embassies, smart systems, all rising with Chinese know-how and financing. It's a political, economic, and image project, a monument to cooperation between Beijing and Cairo, and proof that Chinese influence reaches deep into Egypt's heart. For China, Egypt is three things in one: a gateway to Europe, thanks to the Suez Canal, a gateway to Africa, through land links with Sudan and Ethiopia, a stable partner that needs investment more than lessons in democracy. For Egypt, China is a financial lifeline and a political umbrella. While the West often demands reforms, transparency, and human rights, Beijing offers cash, equipment, and manpower. In return, it expects only one thing: a seat at the table through which the world's goods pass. The Egyptian authorities say Suez is a gift from God. The Chinese add, yes, but God needs an investor. And it is Beijing that has become the investor in this divine geography, strengthening its foothold where three continents meet. Today, the Suez Canal is not only a symbol of Egyptian pride, but also of Chinese strategy. Because if Beijing has a heart somewhere in the Middle East, it beats here, between Sokhna and Port Said, between the desert and the sea, between tradition and global trade. Egypt has always been a gateway between East and West, but never before has this gate been so wide open to China. Once, the center of the world lay between Rome and Alexandria. Today it has shifted, somewhere between Dubai and Riyadh, because it is precisely there that trade, technology, energy, and ambition meet. And between them, China, stepping into every port, every office, every laboratory. Dubai has long known that oil is not enough. It built a global trade hub out of the desert, with Jebel Ali port as its beating heart. But today, as traditional empires retreat, Dubai is searching for a new language of success, the language of technology and partnerships. That language is increasingly spoken in Chinese. Chinese firms are everywhere, in the Dubai Industrial City Zone, in DP World Ports, in the DIFC, where they open investment and venture capital offices, in the Al Qusais district, where hundreds of Chinese wholesale outlets are emerging. Dubai is home to Dragon Mart, the largest Chinese market outside Asia, and next to it, logistics centers for Huawei, Lenovo, and Hisense. These are no longer stalls with cheap trinkets. This is the staging ground for global expansion, from smart cities to green energy. The Emirates and China are also jointly building the future of aviation. Huawei co-creates communication systems for Emirates Airlines, while Chinese AI firms provide algorithms for analyzing air traffic in Dubai. All this is happening in a city born of oil, but growing thanks to data. On the other side of the desert, a new player is rising: Saudi Arabia. For decades conservative and closed, it is now undergoing a civilizational overhaul. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's Vision 2030 is a plan to transform the country from an exporter of oil into an exporter of innovation. And in that plan, Beijing plays first violin. Chinese companies are building refineries, factories, power plants, and railways. Huawei is rolling out 5G in Jeddah, Riyadh, and Tabuk. China Railway Construction Company is building segments of Saudi high-speed rail, linking Mecca, Medina, and Dammam. And in the heart of the desert, Neom is rising, a futuristic city where Chinese engineers design infrastructure, solar systems, and data networks. This is no longer just cooperation, it is symbiosis, technological, financial, and political. Riyadh needs technology and investment. Beijing needs stable partners and access to energy. Both sides get what they want. But between Dubai and Riyadh, a quiet rivalry is also unfolding. Both states want to be the center of the Arab world, the main stop on China's route. Dubai has the logistical advantage: ports, airlines, capital. Riyadh has demographic weight and the ambition to build its own Dubai 2.0. For China, this is ideal. Two competitors racing for its favor. China's strategy is simple. Don't choose one capital. Make deals with both. Build factories in the Emirates, contracts in Saudi Arabia, ports in Egypt, and railways in Israel. Then there is no single partner. There is an entire web of influence. And that web has no borders. Dubai and Riyadh are today like two towers in the same game. One built on innovation, the other on oil and reforms. Between them stretches a sea of sand, crossed by Chinese containers, data, and investments. Beijing does not need an army here. Trade and patience are enough. In a world shifting from the Atlantic to the Indian Ocean, it is not the West, but the Middle East that is becoming the new center of the world. And if you look at the map from a satellite, you can see it clearly. When night falls on Europe, the lights of Dubai and Riyadh shine brighter than ever. And more often, they shine in red. On old maps, the Middle East was the center of the world. Today, it is again, only differently. Not because of wars, not because of oil, but because of the routes that connect continents. Chinese ships, planes, and investments weave the region into a network that ignores borders. From the ports of Haifa and Sokhna through Dubai and Riyadh to the Suez Canal, this is the new Silk Road, woven from data, containers, and ambition. The Middle East is no longer just a bridge between East and West. It has become their shared backbone. And China, the architect of a map that no one ever drew, but that everyone travels on today,